Hello, everybody. Erica here to welcome you to another episode of CrimeDoor Live. I'm so excited you're all here because I've been already having a phenomenal conversation with our guest today. So I'm ready for all of you to join. And I'm so excited to introduce to you all Bridget Brosnahan. How'd I do on pronunciation?
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Awesome. Bridget is a former crime scene detective and a current lecturer at Dr. Henry Lee's College of Criminal Justice and Forensic Sciences, and that is at the University of New Haven in Connecticut. Again, those of you watching at home, we want you to be a part of this conversation. So drop your questions in the chat. Bridget, thank you so much for being here with us today. I just met you like 10 minutes ago, and we already have so much to talk about.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So I know we talked a little bit about what you do, but just for our viewers here and our audience that is really interested in true crime and especially these types of roles, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? I understand you were a police detective from the New Haven Police Department. What did a day in the life look like in that role, and how has that brought us to what you're doing today?
Thanks. I did spend a lot of years as a police officer in New Haven and just shy of 22 years, and then I retired. So I'm recently retired from there, but I spent about 16 years in the Detective Bureau in the crime scene unit investigating crime scenes. So that's really where my area of expertise lies. Um, and I currently am working at the University of New Haven, teaching these amazing students that are so eager to enter the field and either do crime scene investigation or there's some type of interest in forensic science. But it's so fun to be a part of their world and kind of give them everything that I've learned, all my experience, all my knowledge, to be able to give it back to them is really exciting.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you about what inspired you to get into this role. Was there a case that sparked your interest? And when we were just talking a moment ago, you said that you basically decided that you wanted to be a detective and anything that it would take to get you there, that was what you were going to do. So tell me more about where that desire came from. What sparked that passion that was necessary to get you into that path?
Yeah, so I get asked this question all the time. And honestly, I truly woke up one day and said, if I had to do everything in my life all over again regarding a career, what would I do? And I kept coming back to the same thing. And that was, I need to be a detective. And so
Wow.
I, at that time, I was watching Forensic Files, like ridiculous marathons of Forensic Files. And I was fascinated and I was just captured by the scientific logic behind forensic science. And the thought of solving a crime with science was just so appealing to me and just sounded very gratifying. And so it kind of reeled me in. That's really what reeled me in was Forensic Files. And and so then I just was obsessed with it and needed to know more about it. And so then I woke up one day and said, well, I'm going to be a detective. So that's kind of how it started. That hit my go button. And I was doing art because I had a degree in art. So I was working in the apparel industry doing art and took a hard left turn into the world of science. And, kind of didn't, I'll be honest, I didn't want to be a police officer. I never saw female officers growing up. And so you just don't identify with that role really. Unlike what young people see nowadays, I didn't really see that. So it was never a thought. I just knew I wanted to be a detective and decided whatever it was going to take for me to do that, that's what I was going to do. And so I joined the police academy and became a police officer. So that's kind of how it all started.
That's amazing. I think many of us can speak to watching Forensic Files and just thinking it's the most fascinating thing ever. From genetic genealogy to cell phone pings we've seen technology, even in the past decade, past couple years, change so many cases and really change the landscape of seeking justice. So what are your thoughts on all the ways that we've seen, technology evolve and progress in investigations?
So, you know, I find this whole idea of technology today to be actually frightening to some degree,
Wow.
because it's advancing so quickly, that we almost can't keep up with it. Yet
Hmm.
human beings are the ones that are creating these advancements. And so, there's a little bit of imbalance as far as what's available to us in the world of law enforcement. It's getting better, but there's new technology that's constantly being worked on and coming to the surface. And I am just amazed at the level of technology that's available today that helps us solve crimes. But at the same time, on the other end, the level of technology that's, lending to criminals, is also very frightening. And so there's this kind of collision, and there's this fast pace of, we better hurry up and learn what these criminals are doing, because they're using their own technology in order to catch them. So it's amazing stuff, really, honestly. I mean, we've seen recent cases where technology, and you mentioned cell phone pings, um, are just really, really, really helpful tools when it comes to a criminal investigation.
Absolutely. And I think the genetic genealogy part of it too is just something that however many years ago people might not have thought that would play such a huge role in decades old cold cases. So it's really incredible. Is there a case that maybe when you were younger kind of sparked your interest, or cases from your career that have really stuck with you?
Well, two kind of separate questions, right? But
Right.
I would say, the OJ Simpson case was kind of happening around the time I started getting interested. And Forensic Files was really just becoming this big thing on TV at the time. And that was in the 90s, in the mid 90s. And so I would say, if I had to choose a case where I was captivated by the forensic aspect and the crime scene aspect, it was the OJ Simpson case. Um, and so, as far as cases that I've had myself, Erica, there's just so many. I worked in a very, very busy, busy city. And unfortunately, a lot of sad, sad crime happened. And the ones that tend to stick with you the most, and they stick with you for different reasons. Um, the ones that involve the children that have, no ability at their ages to defend themselves, really do a number on you, mentally, emotionally. And those are really hard. And I think any human being that has some type of healthy psyche, can certainly feel that. And then there's other cases that you just solve with science that, excite you. You've put somebody away by using science to do it and to prove that they did it. And so those are always fascinating to me. And up until the day I retired, I was still given high fives in the office if we solved a case with a fingerprint. I was a fingerprint examiner, and it's one of those techniques we use as investigators. It's a big tool, but it's not considered a real science because it can't be tested. However, it's a very recognized technique in our world. And there is nothing better than getting a fingerprint at a crime scene from your perpetrator. So I would say I've had so many different cases, but anything where you're solving it with science, I get excited about. And then the ones that are sad, the ones that tug on your heartstrings, the ones with, domestic violence, the ones where you have a true victim that could not defend themselves. It's heart-wrenching.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that you're, by nature a creative person, you're an empath. How do you figure out a way to move forward from those situations? I think for many people, these stories are something that maybe many people can't even bear to consume, much less be in the weeds and really working with these cases, how have you kind of learned to do what it takes to move forward when you were working in that really harsh kind of environment?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And, when I think about it, I kind of don't know, except that, I have a very strong faith. And so, God in my life was very present throughout my career and still is. And so having that kind of reliance was good for me. That's what worked for me. But you just plow through, when you have a career like this, you put on your uniform every day, and to some degree, you put your shield of armor around you, and you really don't honestly take it off until the day you leave. And I mean, leave the career. I did almost 22 years and didn't realize the impact that this job had on me until I actually left. So
Wow.
yeah, you deal with it every day. It's your job, and you're like, I'm good, I got this. And then some days you're like, I don't know if I have this, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have a guest question here that I would love to ask you. So the viewer is asking, is AI used to solve crimes? And if yes, how? So tying into that, the way the technology is affecting these investigations.
Yeah, so I don't actually know too much about AI as far as what it's doing. I am sure the government, to some degree, has use of AI locally in local police departments. There's lower end probably levels of AI that are being used, but not to the degrees where maybe he's thinking or the person is asking. I just don't have a lot of knowledge about it, so it's nothing that I actually was involved with.
Yeah, I think it's something that it's AI is kind of a topic in a lot of different fields. I know our team recently saw, I need to look at a little bit deeper information about it, but I believe in Mexico, they're developing technology for AI to be used to solve missing person cases. So I think in these cases, when there's just so much information, whether it's looking for patterns, hopefully, it can play a role in seeking justice in these cases as well. So in addition to investigating in the field, you've taken that experience and brought it into an educational setting, which is so incredible. After being a police investigator, what made you want to move into lecturing and teaching?
So I just feel connected to students in the classroom, and I love my students. I love being able to share my stories with them, my experiences with them. Some of them are so incredibly passionate about moving into this field, and so I can see myself in a lot of them and where I was, and just having this burning desire to do this type of work. And so, if I retired from this career and shut the door and held in everything that I've learned, all my experiences, what good is that? It's only appropriate for me to give it back to the young people who want to do this job.
Absolutely. That's incredible. And I'm sure that the way that you were inspired to pursue this career, I'm sure you're doing the same thing for people, especially young women, which is amazing. I would love to talk a little bit about your involvement with the Canine First Responders Unit. We talked a little bit before we went on air, but what can you tell me about what you do with them, what that organization does, some of the cases that you've worked on with that group?
So, Canine First Responders was founded by a man named Brad Cole here in Connecticut. And he had a dog named Spartacus that he was utilizing as a therapy dog, and found himself after the Sandy Hook incident in Newtown, Connecticut, responding to that location and helping out where he could with his dog. And what he discovered was that him being so kind of in tune to the people the dog was connecting with, realized what was happening. And, the purpose of our organization is to help people kind of move. It bridges the gap between a traumatic incident and feeling normal again. And so the dogs have a handler, and the handlers are all certified in psychological first aid. And so it's a partnership. We have a partnership with our canine partners, and the dogs honestly do most of the work. And one of the most beautiful things about the dogs is that they sit there and they are not in judgment of the person who may have been struggling or is struggling with their mental status post a traumatic incident. And so the dogs are doing tremendous work. And then as handlers, we're paying attention to the people that we're interacting with and noticing if maybe we need to offer some additional resources for their mental health and wellness at that point. So it's a really cool kind of team effort between a human and a dog. And we have seen it happen over and over and over again, the amazing work that these dogs do and the kind of level of normalization that comes back to someone who's just experienced a very traumatic incident. So it's fascinating work.
Wow.
I did go to the synagogue shooting out in Pittsburgh in October of sorry, I forget the year, maybe 2018, 2020, 2019. I forget the year, but it was the synagogue at in Pittsburgh where there was a mass shooting. I did have the opportunity to go there and be with the dogs and be with people, and the dogs did tremendous work. And our first line is really to visit our police officers and our firemen and our first responders, and we went to the medical examiner's office because they're often forgot about, and they're those doctors and pathologists are looking at a lot of bodies on a daily basis when you have a mass shooting like that. And so we can't forget about them either and how they play a role in what we do. And so we visited them with the dogs, and they were just so appreciative. So yeah, I've been deployed to lots of places, but the synagogue was the most memorable.
Absolutely. And it sounds like people who are both survivors or involved, but also responding to these situations, mental health is just a huge component that needs to be considered across all parties. So as somebody who was working in the field for that span of your career, how did you see mental health handled with all of you as professionals when you're the ones there to render aid and investigate and be doing a lot of the work? How did you, whether it was on you or your team, manage your own mental health and make sure that you were taking care of yourselves?
So, we can always do better. And I am so lucky to have come from a police department that makes it a priority that their officers are healthy in the mind. And we have peer advocacy resources at my police department. I was a peer advocate. And so our resources are very much available to us, but there are a lot of places that don't have those resources. And so that's a concern, right? I have a support page that I run on Facebook called Silence to Sound. And so I am simply helping people who are in distress, first responders who are in distress and wanting help and don't have that support at their police department, to find help for them in the area in which they live. And so I've had quite a few police officers, even military people, reach out to me through that Facebook page, just saying, hey, we don't have any services. I need help. How can you help me? So we can always do better. And I think that I just happen to be in a place in Connecticut that is in the forefront when it comes to mental health and wellness for police officers and first responders. And it's awesome. But there's a lot of places that don't have that.
Yeah, somebody in the chat said we must make these resources a priority. It is so important. And I do think within, especially the true crime space, I'm glad to see the conversation shifting in that direction. I think in a variety of ways. So mental health of officers, and as well the shift in taking all of those things seriously. So taking the signs of domestic violence seriously, taking the signs of stalking seriously. But in your career, what was your involvement with cases like that? And what would you say to somebody who may find themselves in a situation that is unsafe?
So, stalking, I'm going to start with that because stalking is a precursor to violent crime. And we know that, and we've seen that. And yet for some reason, and there are laws that do protect our victims, but it's it can be a very, very difficult thing to investigate when it comes to stalking and proving that somebody is actually the one that's behind what's happening. That's the hardest part.
Hmm.
But every agency, every jurisdiction has different, maybe local laws, different state laws. And so I don't know what the laws are in every place. I know in Connecticut, we do have laws to protect against stalking. But it's a difficult thing. It's a difficult crime to investigate. As far as my involvement with domestic crimes, I mean, I've been to lots of domestics, unfortunately, from the simplest verbal argument all the way to murder, which is terribly sad. It's horrible to see. There are so many resources that are available to victims, to women who are finding themselves in an abusive relationship and just need a little help, but are afraid to kind of go and do that. So there's lots of resources that are out there. There really are. And we just have to help each other and support each other in recognizing, like you said, or taking things seriously, which I think there's a level that they are. What I would like to see more is a recognition that the signs are there, right? How do we recognize someone who may be dealing with these things? And that can be very, very difficult. And once the recognition happens, then you can maybe come up with a plan of approach for this person in a way that's comfortable for them, and then get them into services. It's a hard process, it's not easy. And all the while, our victims are feeling afraid, and especially in stalking situations. So we can always do better in those areas too, right? And I think just being aware that someone may be dealing with something behind closed doors is enough for us to just be a little bit more vigilant.
Absolutely. And I think that's where sharing that information, you never know who might need to see exactly that, whether it's sharing the National Domestic Violence Hotline number or sharing safety planning tips. I forget what the exact number is, the average time that a victim tries to leave. It's so much more complicated than someone being in a dangerous situation and just up and walking. So absolutely, it's incredible to be able to just share the information so that when someone does find themselves in that situation, they can take action. So as we get to the wrap up here, this is a question I really like to ask all of you experts within the space. So we've talked about the fact that true crime is compelling to many people right now. But I think with that, a question that I always want to ask is, how do you think the true crime community can do good for these cases, for victims and for survivors?
So, Erica, you've touched upon a couple things just in our last segment when we talked about getting information out, right? And every day we hear the police say, we need the public's help, we need the public's help. And we truly do need the public's help in solving crime. We cannot just do it alone. And we're not trying to do it alone. We do need the public's help. And the true crime stuff that's going on right now in America, although it can be overwhelming to sift through some of the things that are being talked about. Shows such as CrimeDoor that and I have to give a little shout out to Uncovered, which is an organization that I'm a part of. The work that you are doing and the work that the people at Uncovered are doing is so incredibly important because it's so genuine. It's so genuine in the efforts that you're putting forth to bring awareness, get information out to help police, even if it's the smallest little bit of information that someone may hear. People are watching these shows, people are listening to these podcasts, people know things. And so the more that people hear and listen and pay attention and have a genuine concern and genuine interest in the victims and the victim's family, then I think then we should never stop, right, doing this work. So I appreciate everything that CrimeDoor does to bring light to cases, and certainly involving families in that process is really, really special.
Well, we certainly appreciate that. I think it's something that the energy around this space can be put to such good use. And I think it's important to always have, the clear lines that investigators need to be the ones doing the investigating. But if we have a community of people with, eyes across the entire world, you never know what you might have seen. You never know what information you might have that, when given to the right party, could be exactly what they're looking for. So I think, we've seen the negatives that do exist, the things that, citizen detectives might be getting a little bit too involved. But if we can just make this a network of awareness and sharing information so that it can be investigated, that's the absolute best case scenario. So I so appreciate you being here with us. It's been so great speaking with you. Before we hop off, is there anything else that you would like to share with the community about what you're working on and where to find you?
Well, you can find me. I do have a consulting business that I've recently started. It's called Code of Ethics, Forensics and Crime Scene Investigation Consulting Services. And I can be emailed at bforensics.com. So I don't know if you could put that up on the screen. But I am working on different cases. People do reach out to me for consultation. I'm always happy to help if I can. And so being involved with Uncovered and these amazing, incredible people on Uncovered, I just feel lucky to be a part of that. And so we're working on some stuff. But it's a process, cold cases are difficult and takes a lot of patience. And I think you're right. If we just have the right person listening at the right time, then we can't go wrong.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the work that you have done for so many years, the work that you continue to do with teaching and encouraging this next generation to join this field. One of our viewers says, thank you both. This was important information for all of us to hear. So we so appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us here on CrimeDoor Live. I'm Erica. Thank you, all of you at home, for joining us, and signing off.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.